Hey, I am Mustafa Sharif, and thank you for listening to Urbanistica podcast. I couldn't wish for a more creative episode than this one because my guest is the head of the unit think tank in the Swedish National Center for Architecture and Design, Linda. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time, and I really appreciate it. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing fine. It's been a year of being head of this group, of having think tank around. So it's been an intensive year. So now it's like we are finally sort of on top of things, it feels like.
Yes, I guess we have a beautiful story to tell in this episode.
Yes.
But before we start, as usual, the mic is yours. Tell me about Linda. Tell me about her passion and what brings the energy inside her out.
Well, I'm an urban planner, so I love working with cities, with architecture and design, and also everything that's new and interesting for me is like challenges, things that I haven't done before, and things that's sort of relevant for making cities a better livable place for people in general. So I'm like very enthusiastic about urban planning in general.
Yeah. So I think we are on the same track.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. And you started in as a head of project think tank for 1 year ago or 2 years?
2 years ago. It wasn't called think tank to begin with. For the first year, I was doing a strategy of how to work with different tasks and missions that we have here in the organization. So my first year was basically all about setting up a plan and a strategy for how to deal with these in an effective way. And a year ago, we introduced the think tank as a concept, sort of.
Yeah. ArkDes. Is it just a museum in Stockholm or?
It used to be a museum. It started in the 60s, sort of like there was a trust fund basically to begin with. Lots of drawings and material that came from like architects' offices basically, and all of that is still around. We have a lot of drawings in our archives, like several millions, and it's really like large archives down in the ground, so it's a lot of things in there. But the museum started in the 60s. It became a state museum in the 70s. A couple of years ago we got some new missions from the government, which was more about creating sort of like a new role for ArkDes. So from the architectural museum, we became the National Center for Architecture and Design. So design was added, and also a couple of years later, we also got new missions about us being the organization that was to evaluate the national policy for architecture and design. So that's a really large task because we basically look at what's happening in the whole country.
Yeah, it's a mega project.
Yeah.
But when you say design, is it specific like interior design or all kind of design?
Well, mostly, the way I see it, design is everything from the city to the spoon. I think there's a famous architect who said that once, and I think it's a really good way of describing that. As a designer, you have to work with to think of who's the user of the city, of the chair, of the room, and the spoon, and so on. And I think that's the role of the designer, and that's really interesting to sort of have on the table when we talk about design. It could be about a lot of things, but of course also about, it could be interiors, could be the spoon, the chair, and so on.
So that's really inspiring. In ArkDes you have a library as well?
Yes we do.
So you have it's not only a museum for exhibitions.
No, we have two large halls for exhibitions. So we have one which is the large room where we have big exhibitions that goes on for like 6 months or so, and then we have a smaller room where we have smaller exhibitions, which is a lot easier and quicker to produce, but they can also be more, since they're quicker to produce, they are more like up to date with what's happening right now, because the big exhibitions, they take a really long time to, the production phase is really long, like a couple of years.
Yeah. If you describe to us the organization or the different teams inside the ArkDes?
Well, we have two teams who work with the exhibition. So we have a curatorial team and we have a production team. So they work together with the content of the exhibition and also producing the exhibitions. And then, we have a library, we have a communications unit, we have an administrative unit, and then my group, which is none of that, which is more like a strategic unit working with like the evaluation of the national goals and so on.
Okay, and how is it going?
It's going well. The last year we did a lot of new and crazy things which we haven't done before, and it worked really well. So it's really nice to see how things are working out.
So what basically you do is that you're taking analyzing the policies, or
well, we look at the policy and then we see what are the different tasks that the different organizations have. And mostly we work together with the National Board of Housing Planning, Boverket, the National Art Council, and the National Heritage Board. And so the four of us, we work together on designed living environment. That's the name of the policy English. So we work with that together. So we have lots of different tasks that we work on, and we evaluate the results of that. But also, the end result of the policy is basically what's happening out in the municipalities and in the building communities on the ground.
So it's not only it's a policy, but you dig down to the scale 1-to-1.
Yeah, we look at all the scales. Basically, we look at what types of decisions has been made, what are the different tasks that different organizations have, and what has happened during this period and what is still missing. So what we do is basically try to look at the missing pieces of the puzzle, to sort of point that out, that here's missing information and different types of knowledge that we see that would be beneficial for like the planning community to know more about, for them to sort of contribute for us reaching the goals of the national policy.
So in each specific, let's say, municipality, there is a special need or there is a special contribution that they can...
Well, we look more at the general level. So we can see now, for instance, is that there are a lot of municipalities in Sweden which has started on working with the architectural policies for the municipality. And that wasn't the case a couple of years ago. A lot of municipalities didn't have that. Now we see that that's improving. Yeah. But we can also see, there's still some of the municipalities who hasn't even started. So there's both things happening and things that goes a bit slow.
Going to.
Yeah.
And what I can see, it's a mega project. Mm-hmm. What is the biggest challenge you're facing?
I would say, for us, it's really easy to be up there on the top looking down and say, there's a lot of things that could be happening which isn't happening. We try to look at both things that are happening and going in the right direction, but we also see a lot of gaps. We can see that there are some missions that different organizations have, and which are sort of in some way the answer, in some ways the way leading forward, but we can also see that there are a lot of tasks and things that should be done which is not happening at the moment. So for instance, a lot of what the policy is about social sustainability, issues like segregation, loneliness, participation and things like that. And still a lot of municipalities feel that they don't have the tools to handle those issues. And that's, we can't give it to them unless we have a really proper task set up for us from the government to actually do so. But what we can see is that there's a need for that, and a lot of municipalities ask for that help. But there's like a really big knowledge gap when it comes to those issues.
And especially for the social aspect of the city.
Yes.
That's a big challenge for urban planners as well, to plan for the social. I mean, we are doing great. We know how the plants grow up. We know the needs of them. We are good in materials, recycling them. But when it comes to people, we are not really
it's difficult.
doing good yet.
And I think, for many urban planners, these issues, it's not new that you have to work with this, but the tools that you have and the way that you can work with plans and design, it's still, we need to find a lot of good examples to be able to sort of provide a toolkit for this is how you do it.
Of course.
And some municipalities, they are far ahead, I would say, compared to others. But some municipalities, they have no idea even where to start. So it's a big difference when you look at the different communities.
Yeah, and do you believe then one actor could solve the problem, or it's about collaboration when it comes to social sustainability? What do you think?
Well, in general, I think when you look at sustainability, you have to look at there's a lot of ways to work with that. I think it's mostly interesting to see, well, you can work with the ecological aspect of sustainability and also get a lot of benefits when it comes to the social part. For instance, if you work with, in my background, I have worked a lot with the bicycle, for instance. So if you get a lot of people on bike, that will be beneficial from the ecological aspect, but also from the social aspect, because you get a lot of health benefits for the society if you get people on bikes.
On the bike.
Yeah. So you can work with things like you do it from one angle or one direction, but you get the benefits somewhere else.
Exactly, and I believe, because the thing that many people assume, let's say, okay, ecological, social, economical, but I believe that why should we separate them? They are together. It's like a one body.
Yeah.
And if you work with this, of course, there will be so many effects and impact on the other aspect.
Definitely. And I think one of the problems is that many people work with them like from different perspectives, or they create different systems of how to deal with them, where they actually separate them in different parts. And especially when it comes to, if you divide the economical part from the other two, it's really, really difficult to work with it, because for most of the stakeholders in a building project, for them it's economy. That's why they're there. So you have to be able to speak money.
Exactly.
And to say this actually leads to this. And today that's really difficult.
It's really tough. But we will come back to that later. But now I want you to tell me more about the project that you're leading.
Yeah, the think tank project.
Tell me the name. The name is really catchy.
Yeah.
Think tank.
Yeah, think tank. It's sort of, that's what we do. We sit in a group and think. No, that's not really it. Well, we're a bunch of mostly project leaders. We work with different types of projects within this group think tank. A lot of the things that we do actually is based on our task of doing this evaluation of the national policies. Because when we do the analysis, we can see that there are certain areas where there's missing knowledge and so on. And then we could sort of pinpoint that and make conferences, collaborations. We try to find ways of actually bringing those subjects to the table in different ways.
It's a mission from the Swedish government, if I'm right.
Yes.
And it's financed by the Swedish government as well.
Yes.
Okay.
So ArkDes, we get a lot of, we get most of our funding is from the government. So the museum gets funding, all the state museum gets funding. So from the government. And we also have a certain, a part of that budget that we have is actually dedicated to research. So we also have research funding. So we have researchers in my group who work themselves with research, but also in different types of research collaborations that we also can use to actually to do analysis and actually to see where there's missing knowledge and actually create that new knowledge within the group.
And what's the focus on think tank? Is it also architecture and design, or you have more categories to do your project and research?
We design the living environment as a whole. So that's basically from the city to the spoon. So we have to work with all of those areas. Mostly, I would say, we look at city planning, because then you sort of combine all of those things. If you work with, for instance, public art, that's also something that's sort of related to how you build new areas or how you refurbish areas that's been there for a while.
So you started it 2018?
Yes.
And directly you made a huge, big open call.
Yeah, that's one of the things
that's very challenging. Yeah, that's very brave.
Yeah, actually, what we did was, since we have this funding for research, we used part of that money to do the open call. So we sort of took away parts of our own budget and said that what should be interesting is to actually have practice-based research where we see things happening actually out there, not within ArkDes, but outside our
yes.
building.
May I know the budget? How much is it?
We had 1 million to start with.
1 million Swedish crowns.
And then when we found out that there were so many interesting projects, we actually took away some more money from one of our own projects and added to the budget. Yeah.
Wow.
So we had, when we did the call for projects in January, we had like about a month until we were sort of drowned in proposals. No, not really. Well, we had 68 proposals. All of them were like super good. So it was really, really difficult to decide between them which ones that we actually were going to give funding. So that's why we increased the budget, because there were so many.
Yeah, you want to include more.
Yeah.
Or what was the criteria?
Well, the criteria was basically that they had to look at gestaltad livsmiljö, designed living environment, to look at the policy and to see what types of issues is actually in there, because we get the funding to actually work with that. So that's what we also wanted to have as one of the criteria for getting funding. But also what we wanted to have, well, it was supposed to be practice-based, so not within our building, so outside. So we actually had it sort of like on the ground, actual projects and actual problems that people within the community see now as something that they need new knowledge within. So we said, well, you have to look at the policy, the national policy, and to see what's in there. You have to be a team of at least 2 organizations, and also with 2 different backgrounds or different type of work. So for instance, an architect from like a huge company could collaborate with the urban planner in a municipality. So that type of collaborations is what we were after. So we had to have like at least 2 organizations, and we also wanted them to come up with ideas that they, from their analysis, that they saw this is missing knowledge that would also be useful for others.
And this was for whole Sweden, right?
Yes,
not only for Stockholm.
Yes, exactly.
It's really interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So recently you had the presentation of the 5 winners of the think tank.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Would you like to share with us?
There's 5 of them, so but I can tell you about my favorites.
Yes.
Well, the 5 ones, all of them, they tackle the issues of sustainability in one way or another. Most of them were really interested in the urban realm, what's actually being built, and things that people see, like on their way to work and so on, that sort of affect others in many ways. I would say my absolute favorite among those projects was a project by Blick Architecture together with KTH, and I can't remember, well, there was like 5 organizations in that collaboration, but they had a project where they looked at how you can sort of reuse old buildings to sort of remodel them in a way so you can produce food within the structures.
Okay.
So they found out, well, they worked with three I think it was 3 different buildings in different areas of Stockholm, where they looked at how they could add greenhouses, fish production, and so on in a sort of a system where everything feeds into one another. And then they had these people who were counting on exactly how much you could actually produce that type of building, and it was really a lot. It was basically fantastic. You could like feed a whole neighborhood from building.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, really cool.
Do you see you work with policies? Do you see the future of implementing this, or it's difficult?
I mean, for all of these projects that we funded, we see that this is things that, well, all of these groups, they had identified that these are things that they haven't had the possibility of actually trying within real projects, but they saw, well, now they have the opportunity of actually trying it out and see what happens. One of the other projects was about participation and how you could sort of get engagement from a whole community in the future of a very central part of the city. That was from a municipality called Tibro, a small place, but what they did was basically to get the whole community into participation about that specific spot. And that was so really, really cool to see.
That's really amazing, because engaging people and the community, and especially in urban planning, it's
difficult.
It's really you're an urban planner. You know the issue. You know what we are facing.
Yeah, it's really difficult, but they made it. It's really interesting to see if it's possible that others can use the method that they were using as well, to see whether it's something that can be implemented in other cities as well.
Is this online on the homepage, and is it open source?
Some of it online, so it's possible to see what's going on, and we plan to make more of it, because now, well, all of these projects were presented just before Christmas, so it's really new for us as well.
Yes.
But we hope that we will be able to do a new call, which will be in next winter or so.
2020.
Yes. So okay. I think we will be able to make the call in December. But first we have to make an evaluation of the projects that received funding, to see whether, was the process okay, and was the outcome of these projects okay? Did we get bang for the buck, basically?
Yes. So it's going to be an open call.
Yes.
Stay for this and stay awake.
Yes.
Open eyes.
Yes.
It's going to be really interesting. Is it going to be on the same topic, or you're trying to find a new theme for the next open call?
Probably it will be the same, because all of the projects that we received from the application, they were really, well, most of them were sort of in one way or another trying to address sustainability, and that was something that we thought was really good, but they were very different. So I think basically we could just go ahead with the ones that we already have, because it's so interesting to just look into all of that. It's so many ideas that it's like, when you read this, you get really wow.
That's fantastic. I imagine you have a dream job by looking to how creative.
Yeah, it's really, really fun.
That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
But if we scale it up to the city level,
mm-hmm.
and do you think Stockholm is rich artistically, or there is a lack of art and culture in the city when you walk out in the streets? Both urban planner and you're working with ArkDes, so you have a good display.
I think it's interesting to sort of put it more in the context of Sweden, because I think in Sweden in general we are a bit cowardly. It's not that we're in the forefront of doing really spectacular or experimental things. It's we sort of try to hold back, I think, not being too over the top, and I think when you go to different cities, like in, for instance, Copenhagen or Amsterdam or Berlin, you can see a lot of more creative things
and
that's
brave.
out there. Yeah, it's more. Apparently, there's more bravery in other countries, and also I think for Stockholm in general, it can be a bit of both. Sometimes in Stockholm, you feel like there's sort of a late adopter. When I come back to things like biking, which I have been working a lot with, a couple of years ago, there was a big no, we can't do anything on this theme, because, people will get mad and we can't remove the cars and it won't work and so on. But then a lot of other cities around Sweden and in other countries, they were doing it. And then finally Stockholm comes around and says, okay, fine, let's try it. Because apparently it works somewhere else. But they do not really want to be in the front. Yeah,
this brings me to a question. What is holding us back from being creative and brave? Are we afraid to do a mistake or to experimenting?
It's difficult to say actually why it's like that. I think it's more about, for instance, when you look at Copenhagen, what they have been doing, they have really strong strategies of what type of city they want to have and how the municipality actually has to work to achieve that. And that's something, when they have that type of strategies, everyone is working on that together. So even if you work in the traffic department or in the environmental department and so on, everyone is sort of collaborating on the same targets. And in Stockholm, I feel like it's a really large organization, and everyone is more afraid of actually doing mistakes rather than working on doing the right thing. So it's a bit different if you compare at least those cities. I have also been working a lot in Norway, and that's also a really different organization when you look at how the city of Oslo works compared to the city of Stockholm. So it's interesting to be around, especially in the Nordic countries, because the legislations and so on, it's really similar. We work in very much the same way when we make new housing and new areas and so on. We work in very different ways.
Yes, I was for 2 months ago in Helsingborg city. It's a beautiful city south of Sweden. And I met the head of Future, Mikko. They have a prize for the biggest mistake you do, which is really good. You can get 5,000 euro for the biggest mistake.
That's so creative.
This is really, I think it's a really good way of the municipality to show that we are not afraid to do mistakes. Like really be brave, creative, and take one step forward.
I think more municipalities should be like Helsingborg, because they are like really visionary, both when it comes to urban planning, but also like innovation. They have someone called Krångelombudsman, which is so amazing that they actually have that.
If you translate it to English,
let's see, in English that would be. I'm not really sure what it should be in English because it's such a weird word. It's someone like, I think ombudsman actually works in English, but krångel, it's like messiness. Weirdness, things like that.
We can already see it in the translation.
Yeah, so it's really difficult. And I think it's so amazing that they have that time.
What's the task of
it's actually a person that where people from the municipality or the community, they can reach out when they find things within the organization of the municipalities that they find difficult or difficult to understand, or processes that's difficult to grasp, and basically it's about for the municipality to actually, I think, say that we know it can be difficult to be in contact with the municipality, but we will help you.
Okay. Yeah. It's like helping information center. But with a really interesting name.
Yeah, and it's a nice twist.
Of course. We mentioned that in the earlier of this episode that real estate owner or developer of the city, they're looking for how to increase their money because this is what they work with and this is what they're living on.
Yeah.
So how do you think we can integrate art and culture in their calculation? Because art will not generate money. How do you convince?
How to convince? Well, that's really difficult. I think when it comes to art, for some organizations, we have something called a 1% target, which is that you have to use 1% of the building revenue to art. And I think the best way of actually doing that is to provide art that's also beneficial for people who are not within that specific building when it comes to a building. So, for instance, if you work with a building, you should have art that's on the outside, so more people can see it and use it and so on. So I think that's a way of working with the 1% rule, but not everyone is working with that. And I think another way of working with art and design when it comes to especially new building housing, for instance, I would say to bring that up really early in the discussion, that this is something like, for instance, if you as a municipality want to have that in the project, if you bring it up early in the conversation, it's sort of really difficult to say that this is something that sort of should be added at the very last end, because the art could be also more about participation. It could be more about actually creating things that's beneficial for people in the area, the people who are going to live there in the future and so on. So it doesn't have to be things that sort of stick on there like at the last minute.
Yeah, exactly. Like add on in the end of the process.
Yeah.
So early stages is very important.
Yes.
And
definitely.
The municipality should push on that.
Yes, definitely.
What are the challenges that ArkDes is facing?
The ArkDes as an organization, or the things that we are working on at the moment?
You can talk about both.
I would say, well, the challenges that we have, especially when it comes to the tasks that we deal with within Think Tank, is actually to see where, I would say, the national policy for designed living environment, it's a really, really good policy. It's really amazing that we have such a policy in Sweden. Not all countries have. I would say in general, very few countries actually have one, but we do. And I think the challenge for us is to be able to actually spread the word, because there is so much happening all over the country in all of the municipalities. And for us to communicate that this is actually here, work with it, when there's such a big flow of information, it's really difficult to actually reach through. So that's something that's difficult to actually wave the flag really hard enough. Come and listen.
Because we have thousands of other policies. And then you're coming with
this one, which is really the most important one of them all. But that might not be the case for people working in, like, for instance, municipalities.
So this is a big challenge that you're facing, like how you communicate.
Exactly. The good thing is that there's 4 of us who do it together, so there's a lot of muscle when it comes to, because we are a really small organization. In ArkDes there's only 38 people, and there's 5 or 6, depending on how you count, in my group. So we are a really small group, and actually trying to tackle all of these big things and looking at what's happening all over the country and so on. So it's really good that we have a collaboration together with the 3 other authorities, and so we also get sort of like a collective knowledge where we also can talk about heritage and public art and so on, even though that's not where our main focus is. We focus mostly on architecture and urban planning and design. But when we have people from the National Art Council on board, we get more knowledge about public art, for instance, and that's really, really good. And it makes the communication a lot easier.
Of course, that's great when you have the different creative minds gather on one table. Then you have the different disciplines, and then the approach is easier to reach.
And I think that's also one of the most important things in the national policy, that they actually, from the government, they point out and say, you have to collaborate. And that's really something I think that's the key to success, that we actually do that. Because if we just had gone on for each and from in our different corners of the world, we wouldn't have achieved the same things.
I believe also collaboration is the key to success in different, like whatever your approach is, you need to collaborate. And especially when it comes to city level and policies. So it's not really a single band man. And what are the other challenges you think that you're facing?
Well, I think as an organization for ArkDes, we're rather small. One of the things that we have as a challenge is that we're situated on the island of Skeppsholmen, which is a beautiful island, but some people find it a bit remote, even though it's in the central parts of Stockholm. But like now it's winter, and all the time, like if we have like a conference and it's free, and if it's raining, a lot of people don't come because it rains. And it feels like it's really, really far to walk over the bridge to come over here.
And actually there is a bus. And there is a boat.
There's
and a bike
lot
lane.
of ways, There's lots of ways of getting here.
It's like I think it's a mental barrier that because you're only 5 minutes to the city center. It's an island, but it's 5 minutes walking to the city center.
And it's like such an oasis. I love working here.
It's beautiful. I wish that it's a podcast, but the view from here is very beautiful. You have the Royal Palace, you have the water. It's amazing. This is the real Stockholm. Very beautiful.
It's a really inspiring place to work at. And especially during summer, it's amazing.
I can imagine. Maybe we do another episode in the summertime.
Out in the garden.
Or every week. That's great. What is the goal for 2020?
I hope we can do another open call. So we just have to see what the evaluation says, whether it's been successful or not. I think there's a hunch there that it's been successful, but that's what I hope for. I also hope that we can make really interesting events and conferences, because that's the thing that we do where we actually reach the most people. Most of the conferences that we do, we also film them, so we can broadcast in either via like Facebook, or we can make films and put it on our webpage and so on. And we get a lot of people actually either coming here or listening in afterwards, and that's really nice.
I really love that you're filming it, because many times I'm here, I'm enjoying very beautiful place, and sometimes like if I'm not in Stockholm, I'm watching it online. It's very inspiring. Really good job. I'm looking forward 2020 with a new conferences and events. It's going to be really great. Your visitors, is it just one kind of group of people, or there is a diversity in age, gender, and backgrounds? What do you have a statistic, or what do you notice? Because you're here every day.
Well, I would say for the exhibitions, we actually don't know exactly who's here. We count the numbers, so we know exactly how many there are, and we do some type of like evaluation where we have people standing and looking at people to sort of see how old they are and so on. But we have, the target group for the exhibitions is like the public in general, but also we have a special focus on mostly young and children, and also people who are not the typical visitor. And that's something that can be sort of discussed. What does that actually mean? And the way that has been interpreted is basically people who have a different socioeconomic background than the typical visitor. So that's what we work with in the organization as a whole. Well, the target group that we have in Think Tank, because mostly we do different types of conferences, we actually aim our work at people who work with architecture, form, design, urban planning, and so on. So we are more aimed at the professional community. What we can see is, especially if we do conferences, we get the names, we get the organization, we get sort of kind of a lot of information about people who actually come to the events. So we can see that there's, what I feel is really interesting, that we get a really large spread on the type of organization that people come from. So we have people who come from like the national level, from municipalities, from different types of consultancy firms, but also people who are just interested in architecture and feel that they have something to say. So they might be retired. A lot of people who are retired, it's they're still interested, but
of course,
still.
Or students. When I was student, I usually attend the events. Really inspiring.
But it's interesting to see when you have that type of information of who's actually coming to the event. You can say, well, we try to sort of reach a broader audience, but still within the target group. And when we have done like conferences on safety, we get people who are from the municipality, but they work, one is an urban planner and one is sort of like a crime prevention strategist and things like that. And they suddenly get together and talk. And that's really interesting.
And that shows how broad and how interesting the topic you're working with is. Yeah. So really good job.
Thanks.
Well, Linda, we're almost in the end of the episode. Now, as how we started the episode with a personal story, we finish it with a personal story as well. What is the next step for you?
Oh, me as a person? Well, I love being in places where there's lots of things happening and where I learn new things. That's something I feel that I do here every day, because this is a completely new type of organization for me. I used to work as a consultant before, and also as an urban planning in different municipalities all over Sweden. And this is a completely new setting, and it's really interesting every day.
I can see it on your eyes, the way you talk. You're really in love with this.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. The last two questions. 3 takeaway messages and 3 hashtags.
Well, the takeaway messages I would say is look at the social sustainability, because that's something that's still considered new, but there's a lot of knowledge out there when you look at the people who are in the forefront of this. And I would say there's a few municipalities who have really strong knowledge already that you could just tap into that knowledge. And that would be, especially Gothenburg and Malmö are really in the front. Stockholm is getting there, but they are not really in the front yet. And also I think looking at municipalities where there's lots of innovation. We talked about Helsingborg. They are really in the front, but also the way I see it, there's a lot of municipalities who work with, especially like climate changes. Uppsala is doing really well on that area. And when it comes to different ways of actually working with planning and design, that's not, well sort of like innovative strategies and processes. There's Örebro. Really interesting to see what they are doing. So that's my suggestion for people who are out there, to see where are things actually happening, but not like in the usual way. And then I would say just look at those 3 municipalities, because they are really in the front.
And the third one?
I would say the third thing is to actually read the national policy for designed living environment. It's really good. There's a lot of good stuff in there. So if you haven't read it already, just do it.
I will do it as well because I didn't
Yeah.
read it. That's a good takeaway message. What are the 3 hashtags?
Think tank, just keep a lookout because lots of things happening. Gestaltad livsmiljö, designed living environment, and also innovation.
Great. Great. Well, Linda, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And hopefully see you in the future with more episode with a lot of inspiration and magic. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you for listening to this episode. Don't forget to get online on the website to look at the creative project. I am Mustafa Sharif, and this is Urbanistica Podcast. Have a good life.